Hey everyone, welcome to the June the meeting of the Node.js Foundation Committee. My name is Brian Hughes. I'm chairing this meeting. We also have on this call Michael Dawson, Warrens, Richard Latour. Forgive me if I'm mispronouncing your last name. Tini Sarin and Tracy Hines. And so, all right, let's go ahead and dive into it. We have several things on the agenda. Create an official secretary position. I'm actually going to recommend that we do this later in the meeting though, because if I remember correctly, Jen Turner had mentioned she might be coming in late. If not, we'll still have the discussion anyway. So let's move on to number 63. This is move Node Together repo as an org under CommComm. White was not able to attend this because she's out of town. Can you kind of talk about this and where we're at?
Yeah. Or did you? Sorry, you broke up a little bit. Did you ask me to?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, can you kind of?
I assumed because I know that I was the leading this as part of the conversation internally. Yeah. I had updated this in the issue, but I realized I did that today. So a lot of people wouldn't have seen that news yet. That when we brought it up for board discussion, it seemed like they appreciated us bringing it to them. But that they had the same concern which they had when we had talked about it in the fall, which was around making sure that there are safe and legal ways for us to be accepting students because it does prioritize underrepresented groups. So the lawyer had requested looking over that, but otherwise, the board indicated that, as I believe you had said, Brian, in the issue itself, that it's not really their scope. It's ours as community committee. So now it will be their scope when we go to request allocation dollars. But otherwise, it sounded like next steps are really on Rachel and the community committee to approve it, but also for Rachel and the organizers of Node Together just to kind of do their coordination with us to make that happen.
And also, and we're still waiting to hear back from legal. That's correct.
That hasn't been turned into legal yet. So it's not that it's a blocker. It's not to say we can't go forward with like ingesting them. It's that like legal just has to sign off on the process. So Node Together as a repo in the Node Foundation just can't accept new students until that process has been signed off on.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Because that's just, it's liability. Yeah.
Yeah, which makes sense. We want to make sure we do these things, correctly. So it sounds like next steps then, wrong everyone, but so next steps is going to be for everyone to discuss this, and we'll come to a consensus on this. And of course, if we can't come to a consensus, then that will go to a vote. So right now, does anyone have any thoughts on bringing it in? Does anyone have any concerns?
I did want to bring up the concern that I brought up last time with the Slack team and how that's going to moderation of that and kind of the scoping of what's going to happen there. That's the only concern that I would have.
Is this Slack an open Slack? Can anyone join?
I believe it was invite only, but I can get resources to go set up a Slack in and create an open one, if open invitation, if that's necessary.
What is the purpose of the Slack?
Tracy would probably be able to say that better than I can, but it generally is scoping. There's a team or a private channel for each event where the members of that event can go and keep discussing their work after the event, and also kind of providing a place for the participants to have a kind of community there.
Yeah. So go ahead.
I was just going to say, wasn't there already a Slack for Node Together?
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So what Tierney's concern, I believe, is that that comes along with Node Together as an org. So it would likely be under the then it would be under the jurisdiction of CommComm, but that would mean that like CommComm would need access or ability to moderate as part of it being in our community. And currently it is closed. So yeah, I mean, if that's part of it, then we have to say, like, as part of Node Together being ingested, they have to at least provide, admin access for somebody else in community committee in order for there to be moderation. Yeah, so previously all of those rooms were closed. Specifically, I believe that there are general spaces where you could mingle across geographies, but there was a channel for each town that Node Together visited, and that was to create like a safe space for people that you had bonded with to be able to ask questions about what you had worked on. And that was and it was closed overall only to people who were organizers of the event or who had attended.
And additionally, there are private channels that have been created for the different groups that were helping organize the event. So there's a community one, a web one, basically organizational ones that allowed people to focus on those bits that they were doing. That was the original intent. So ingesting that and making sure that's kind of taken care of is going to be part of this process, I think.
Do you happen to know if they have a code of conduct or moderation guideline already?
Oh, yes.
Okay, specifically for Slack, that is.
Slack, I'm not sure.
The code of conduct applied to everything, but and Ashley provided that as part of all the Node Together stuff. But I don't know how. I don't recall like how severe or not severe or how explicit the moderation rules for Slack were.
Yeah, so the thing I'm kind of wondering right now is, will we need to make any modifications to that to make sure that it can coexist with the other codes of conduct we have, especially on the GitHub side? Yeah. We can take this offline, though. We don't have to discuss that part in the meeting. So I think it sounds like we need to get that clarification. Need to make any changes to their code of conduct to make it align with the Node.js one? Hopefully not. And then once that we've kind of had that discussion, then it sounds like we just need to make an official decision. So okay, yeah, I will drop that note. I'll take that on as an action item to get that discussion going within the issue.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Does anyone else have any final thoughts before we move on to the next one?
I guess the only thing I noticed is it says it was adapted from the contributor covenant, which I think there's an issue to move the overall repo to that as well, right? That might help on that front.
Yeah.
Yeah, that would definitely make it easy.
So anyway, just thinking if there is an issue there, maybe we can circle back on that other issue and try and push that one forward.
Cool.
All right, so next one, a very similar issue. This is number 46. This is request to move Node.js/education under CommComm. And Tracy, do you want to fill in on where we're at with that?
Yeah, I think this was, so I don't know what happened because I thought that the issue, I think this is that because we had opened so many issues all at once. The education under CommComm issue, I couldn't find it under the TSC. So I opened another issue today because I couldn't find it open or closed to make sure that the TSC is okay. So that has to be on hold until members of the TSC talk about it. So this one's just for next time.
Okay, in that case, I'm going to go ahead and remove the community committee agenda label for now.
Yeah,
thanks. On the TSC. Cool. Is there anything else we need to discuss on that one? All right, moving on. So we have number 38, adding folks as new members. We have this one tagged as CC agenda. Let's see, where did we leave off on that one? Okay, looks like we don't actually have anything new online, any new developments there. So my understanding, correct me if I'm wrong, everyone, is that we kind of need to create a contributing guide. That's probably the big thing we're lacking right now that sort of touches on this topic. And we also need to get a number of teams and working groups moved over, which we're in the process on that. We have 2 teams under us right now. Collection, the other is for discussing events and like event planning and things like that. Those are both super new. I don't think they have any momentum yet. And then we're also looking at bringing these 2 working groups under.
So are those open as separate issues? Because I feel like what we're talking about here, this adding folks as members, I feel like we keep revisiting it, but I feel like the tasks to accomplish this are actually like different issues. Like I believe that we have creating a contributing guide as a separate issue. Or is that this is blocked on these other issues?
There is an issue for creating a contributing guide. It's issue 69. Yeah, and so there's a slight bit of discussion there. So I think that's part of the issue, the issue that needs to be addressed with that. I don't know the other actionable parts of that. Is that the only actionable part?
Right. That's why I just wanted to make sure that like what do we actually need to do to finish this, to get this shipped? So we need the contributing guide. And what else? What did you say, Brian?
I think that's what we need as a contributing guide. I think there are certain things in the contributing guide that we have to make sure are there. Specifically, how do people actually become members of CommComm? We've been kind of pushing back on this a little bit, not wanting to solve it right now, like that specific question of how people get added to CommComm. So I think there's a context to it. If we look at the TSC, which is our model for a lot of things, that's actually a little bit messy over there too. Okay, forget that. Let's look at the CTC. It's a better example. So in order to get on the CTC, there's a very clear path to how you join. You first get added as a collaborator. You make contributions to code, get pull request line, and things like that. And then once you've been as a collaborator, you keep getting involved. Eventually, you get nominated by someone else. If I remember correctly, and correct me if I'm wrong, Miles and Michael, but yeah, you get nominated by someone else to the CTC, and then the CTC votes on it to get you added. The criteria on that side is pretty straightforward because you can look at like code contributions. There are always artifacts. We don't necessarily have that. So like, what does that path look like to becoming a member? And so my thoughts and opinions on this is that it's going to be getting involved in the community committee or the teams and working groups underneath the community committee first, showing activity there. And then, I don't know, there's sort of a couple of steps in the middle that we need to figure out. It's like, should people be required to be part of the team or working group first or not? I don't really know.
Right. Yeah. So I think that's just somebody PRing the contributing guide with those sorts of ideas and playing with them and getting that pushed through, because we can't. So I think that, just brings up the like how many issues we have open that are actually like things that need to be done, not like ideas to be discussed. They aren't decisions. They are like literal work, like calls for work. So like once somebody PRs that contributing guide, I think we do have like a first pass at a path, right? Because we've discussed in prior meetings how like the simple path, because we're trying to lower the barrier compared to things like CTC and TSC, is that like first, like you start showing up, you start showing up to meetings and being in repos, and you can ask to become an observer so that you can come and participate on the calls, and then you start attending, right, more, and then once you're officially as an observer, like on the calls, you're attending meetings, you're being marked as attending meetings. I don't even know if it needs to be as an observer, but like you could be attending the meetings. And then what we had said before, which was like meeting the minimum attendance, right? So if you meet the minimum, participation percentage of what the members are already required to do, then you are added as a member. So I think like that's can try and draft this up because this is something like I need to just go through and look at our old notes because I think we have a lot of to-dos that may have not been translated as issues, and see if that's what's blocking people from being able to get this stuff finished. Because I think that we've laid this out in prior notes.
Yeah, I mean, I remember definitely that's what you just
Yeah.
described is what was talked about.
Right. So like we've talked about this multiple times. It's that like I think it's that like it's contained in the notes of these meetings and then not being transferred back to the individual issues for people to be able to move along. So I have that as a to-do for myself. If I can find that time tomorrow, I will do that.
One thing I do want to say is actually a lot like, as we were talking about this, I just realized a lot of this was kind of partially addressed in the evangelism working group back when it was started. You know, there's, you know, not really a mention in the governance or contributing documents of this. And I know I made a pretty strong effort, not necessarily in those documents. I'm looking and I'm not quite sure if those are the right documents around that. But, you know, there's no mention of actual code contributions in either of those documents. So, you know, that might be a good place to kind of start and then also kind of maybe get feedback on, you know, the ups and downs that evangelism had. And, you know, there's documentation there. We could probably go base it off that and then kind of build out from that.
That is very helpful. I have noted that. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah, I really like that idea. Anytime we can use, you know, prior art and prior experience, that's a win. Okay,
Cool.
so action items specifically for this is like go through the previous notes, get things together, and then for someone to submit a PR with like a first run at a contributing guide. Is there anyone who wants to volunteer to take that on? And if not, that's fine. We can just kind of take it back to GitHub and find someone there.
I will.
Okay, great. And we don't have to do this all at once either, I'll say. We could definitely start of what CommComm, the teams and working groups. And then we can sort of get the more procedural aspects of becoming a member as like a second wave or second run.
Yeah, I would just write something and then, you know, it's like a lot of our documents, we can change them if we don't like them after a while, right? So.
Yep. Yeah. Once you do the dirty draft, everyone will have an opinion.
Yeah, and I was just saying, and it doesn't need to be perfect. Like if if we choose something for now, and then it's 2 months from now, or even 2 weeks, you know, I think the rest of the places we've always been very flexible in saying let's not make it perfect or fix problems that we don't have now.
Yep.
Get something and then evolve as we need to.
Cool.
Awesome. Sounds good.
Hey, any final thoughts before we move on to the next issue? All right, next up we have issue number 33, moderation shortage. So there are several, I think, aspects to this. This specific issue was filed to address the lack of moderators and the Node.js channel on Freenode and IRC. So it was like, you know, addressing a very, very specific issue. Now I do think this is probably a broader issue as well. You know, do we have enough moderators in Node.js-dev and IRC? There's of course the Node.js Slack community and on and on. So, okay, I'm looking through this and kind of getting caught up on it real quick. We opened another issue, number 20, which is related to this one, which is call for moderators. And yeah, that as well. We've had some people who have stepped up to help out.
So is this call for moderators specifically for the community committee related stuff or for the project as a whole?
No, it's for a project as a whole.
So I'd be interested to hear Michael's take on this, but in a number of different environments, and I know that some people on the TSC hold the sentiment, people are not thrilled at the idea of people showing up with the intent to like fill moderator shoes who are not already like an active participant in the project or in the technical governance of the project.
Yeah.
And this introduces a little bit of a conflict there, especially like a distrust from, like one thing I've heard in particular is that people distrust those who show up explicitly just to moderate, which I mean, I can understand where it's coming from. I also don't necessarily agree with it and think that, you know, there are people who are skilled and learned at this who can come in and help. But I do think that we need to be aware of this kind of pushback when trying to do an initiative like this.
Yeah, so Michael and I were actually talking about this earlier, and he's on the way to another meeting, which is why he's not on the call right now. So this is sort of one of those like meta conversations, right, that the TSC is having and that we've been having because it's not on the agenda for today, but Brian had, you know, started the conversation with the TSC about moderation moving over to CommComm. And what's interesting here is that I think people still who aren't participating with the community committee aren't knowledgeable in like what the scope is, right? And so when you talk about like moderation, even like, okay, so we're doing a call for moderators to help out the project because like the community committee like represents, you know, people working in the project too. They just don't represent the technical scope. And part of this catch-22 is, right, you can't be in moderation unless you're contributing to the technical side or anything that was currently scoped under the TSC. So in order for anyone from the community committee to be like considered as part of this moderation process, right, then they have to contribute technically. And I don't think that that's, or they would need to be contributing to something like evangelism, which is currently under the TSC. So I think we have this weird catch-22 where it's people who work on the technical part of the project see this as like still unreasonably like this weird, like, let's move it over to a bunch of people who like we aren't interacting with on a daily basis. When in fact, what it is, if you're looking at this like Venn diagram of like areas of the project, community committee is also TSC, right? Like everybody who's within the TSC and working on those parts of the project are also represented within the community committee. So the moderation, to phrase it as like it being moved over is simply from a repo term from like workload standpoint. That's not to say that everyone who's been currently working on moderation would not continue to work on moderation because it's expanding the scope of what moderation is covering, right? Because currently moderation only covers the TSC parts of the project.
Yeah, I think like in the discussion in the TSC meeting, it was around like the model, and if the model was that the moderators for the specific projects, like, you know, core, I don't know, website, you know, the different, if the moderators for those came from the people contributing to those projects, you know, so if the day-to-day moderation was from people in those groups, I think that was what people were looking for. And if that's the model, then you could see that above that, there's sort of a responsibility for making sure moderation is working well overall, which is separate from the day-to-day, you know, watching what's going on and blocking issues or whatever. And then, you know, if you had that model, then maybe it matters less who owns the higher level thing, because it's more about making, you know, we all agree the model is that the people doing the work are the ones who are there, but then the team who's going to take the leadership for making sure that we think it's working well overall fits into CommComm versus TSC or whatever is then a slightly different discussion.
Yeah.
So one of the things for me that I think is important to focus on is like, I think we need to separate the things that are working from the things that are not working, and be extremely explicit about what we're trying to fix. So for example, and please correct me if you think that I'm wrong, but I genuinely feel that the technical project, explicitly core, is doing a fairly good job of moderating. It's not perfect. There's still places to improve, but explicitly and specifically, collaborators moderating non-collaborators is, you know, is something that I'm actually really proud of how much work we've done towards creating a process that doesn't need these kinds of hierarchies. Now, where this process falls apart is with collaborator moderation, and then further, when there's any sort of moderation request that involves technical leadership, and how we manage that, and how we actually we need a new process around that, and more explicit process around that, and likely people specific for that. That's like one place where we can improve. The other place where we definitely need more explicit stuff is like IRC. But this is an interesting thing, which is another space where we have a channel filled with people who are often there and often doing things. And one would assume that most likely the people who are best prepared to be monitoring those spaces are the ones who are active in those spaces. So for example, if I go and take a look at Node Dev, we've got myself and Trevor and LJ Harb, and you're in there, Tracy, and so is Fishrock.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in theory, we could put everyone from the CTC as a mod in there, and that could be part of it, and that could help. And it is a space where the CTC is consistently active, so it will just take care of itself. But now when we just look at Node.js itself, how many of the people who are in there as moderators are actively participating in the chat is another thing. But so I guess to summate all these things that I just kind of vomited everywhere there, was just more along the lines that I think if we were to do a quote-unquote call for moderators, we'll have much more success if we scope which moderators we're doing a call for. And we may even find that what we really need to do is make some sort of diagram of what moderators we need in what spaces. And those people are probably already there. And I think that may be kind of the crux of the argument. And maybe we're getting blinded by the fact that we're talking about a technical space, so it's people who are in the technical project. But I think it's more we should be building up people who are already in and active in those spaces. And if we just call for people who aren't active in those spaces to kind of airdrop in, I think it's going to get weird. Also, Jen, I thought you were a picture for 2 minutes, but then you were moving and it freaked me out. Sorry for calling you out there. That was pretty amazing.
So what I think all of this is to say is that I think that this issue is a little odd. I think we should take it off the agenda, because what I recall about this moderation shortage issue is that it is actually a part of a whole block of moderation things that need to happen. And it was one of them, right? Because one of the biggest concerns was if we try and fix moderation and scope, we don't have enough people to do it. So it made sense to do this call, right? To discuss the call for moderators and to discuss the shortage and how we could solve that. But it's not that there's even blockers, it's that there's a couple things that need to happen. And part of it is buy-in from everyone. So I'm wondering how we refine this, because we have so we've got the request to move moderation, we've got this moderation shortage, and we've got the call for moderators. Do we have any other outstanding moderation issues?
Wasn't there also the issue, didn't James open an issue that proposed the shared ownership?
Yeah, this is a pull request on the TSC repo. I don't have it handy right now. Yeah, so that pull requested a number of things. I think there's 4 or 5 different things that it did. And one of the things it did was to establish an escalation policy. And the way it would escalate is it would escalate to both committees simultaneously. And we can talk about the details and if that's the best way to do it or not. But that is one thing that's out there. I think we probably want to see a conclusion to that sort of wrap up. So there's that. There's also moving moderation responsibilities to CommComm. So that and the TSCP are kind of, they're very related. And I think that there are some discrepancies between them that need to be ironed out. But once we get that kind of figured out, we really figure out who's going to own the process and things like that, then we can start getting more involved as the community committee. But also, I want to say, yeah, like Michael and Miles and Tracy, everything you said, I'm on board with. And that, yeah, I think having the people who are really involved in those areas of the project are the best people to moderate, because they know the context and all of that. I think we can do a lot to really enable these people, though, be more effective at moderating, and this comes in the form of like guidelines and things of that nature. So I think that will eventually be an area where we can also contribute back, but that's, I think, down the road.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's if you have the model that the people come from the groups, then it's like the value that a different organization can provide is like external experience, training, whatever, to help those people, or whatever other resources they need to make it as easy as possible on them, right?
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. All right,
So
so
are there-
it sounds like,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, so what I actually wrote down that like I feel like this is such a big, because I remember even when I was taking these notes at Collab Summit that it's like it's a project in itself, like project managing all of these moving pieces. So I feel like the to-do for getting a grasp on this is like documenting that in an issue and tracking all of these other issues together there, to make sure that we're getting all of the input that we need so we know what we need to do moving forward, because a lot of this does live with the TSC in active conversations that are happening there as well.
Yeah, I agree. I think breaking it down into the smallest possible parts and then making that a list,
Yes.
and then going through and checking off each one of those, making sure they're done, that will allow us to kind of speed up this process.
I wonder if it might be prudent to wait until we get to a resolution on, whether or not moderation will move wholesale over to CommComm, or we end up doing a joint thing. I wonder if figuring that out first might be necessary, because like depending on how this ends up like landing and shaking out, like I could see it being the steps that need to be taken being different depending on where moderation ends.
Sure, but I think that we actually have some open issues as part of even that conversation. That's why I'm saying this needs to be tracked, because I think it sounds like, because it was my understanding that even the conversation from the last TSC meeting was missing context. So like I missed part of the meeting, but when I stepped in, there were a lot of questions that like should have been covered somewhere. So like the fact that like folks in the TSC didn't have that context, it makes it really incredibly difficult for them to have a picture to be able to decide on. So like I just think that like there needs to I think we've got too many moving parts, and I think that's why we need to do that first.
Yeah, and trying to feed some of that into, like, James wrote up a fairly good starting point. If it could be all that was fed into that, where it's like, here's the model, maybe that's a way to capture it, to help people say, okay, well, with this model I'm comfortable with it here or there or shared, right?
Yeah. Okay, cool. All right, so we've got the to-do written down for that, Brian.
Yeah, and just confirming the to-do is to create this like meta issue that's like tracking moderation proposals.
So, Tracy, what may help would be like a centralized document that outlines like the actual like idea of how moderation could like at a high level be managed. Like, what is the goal that we're working towards with all of these? And if we have one place that we can point people that outlines it, it may be a lot clearer and easier to follow.
Okay. Yeah, I think we already have some of that written out from the Collab Summit, since we had talked about it so much. So I'll try and pull that up. Cool.
Cool. Are there any final thoughts on this before we move on?
We set up a Node CommComm IRC group at the last meeting in Berlin. It hasn't been used at all. I had a notification to review in one of these calls the activity of it and keep going. This seems relevant to moderation since it's also an IRC channel. It's not the most pressing matter. I just wanted to raise that.
Yeah, no, that's a good reminder. I don't know how much did we file a PR that added that to our README?
No, we just created it and then promptly did absolutely nothing.
Okay, let me add that as a separate.
I see a message from a couple weeks ago. I said CommComm. I used a lot of M's. There's like a message from Ashley. I also just pinged you, Richard.
I know. And there's also no moderators in this. I just wanted to point it out since we're just talking about IRC anyway.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think this was obviously not a glowing success, but at the same time, I don't think we've been really doing too much coordination outside of the meetings.
Right.
So should we open an issue about looking at it, or should we just decide to just keep it up?
I mean, it's not hurting anything by being there as long as no one is wreaking havoc in it.
Nope, except Miles.
There's not havoc, it was love.
Okay, so I've added a to-do to just add the CommComm IRC channel to README.
Sounds good, thanks.
Well, we have one item left on our agenda. Or actually, sorry, we have two still. So the next one is in the Node.js collection repo. This is refreshing Node.js collection review process and gathering technical editors, issue number 1. And, Tierney, you had background on this. Did you want to kind of talk about this and set this up?
Yeah, I only had a little bit of background today. I actually couldn't find the repo easily for a bit, so I had to go digging for that. I started like 3 times, but with that, I know Zibby Keaton requested that I kind of help service this since she wouldn't be around from the foundation to help discuss it today. So basically, they'd like to get seeing what our next steps are so we can start executing on that. I'm happy to help lead that. I know I didn't know I was going to raise actually making it a team today, but it looks like it might already be based on a couple of comments from you, Brian. And then so that looks good. Otherwise, just kind of solidifying that and making it final. That would be kind of just figure out next steps, basically.
Yeah, so where we're at right now is, I created a team for it. I am double checking it right now to see if I had added you, Tierney. I thought I did.
Yep, you have. I can close the issue, so yes.
Okay, cool. And yeah, if anyone else wants to be added to the team, let me know. I think I gave you admin rights, so I think you can add people as well on your own. Okay. If not, let me know. I'll try to figure it out. But if nothing else, I can add people to the team as well. And yeah, so at this point, what I would say from CommComm's perspective is this is a team that we oversee. So at this point, it's up to the team to kind of start doing the work. But of course, if there's anything you're stuck or blocked on, especially process-wise, involving the rest of the Node.js org, those are things that you want to escalate to CommComm.
Okay. So with that, should we be adding a section or a doc to the CommComm repo of active teams and working groups? And also, is there any other kind of documentation that needs to go in this repo as a team, like a code of conduct or something like that?
So there's a couple things on this. We do need to update CommComm's repo to say that document all the teams under us. This will go, I think, in the contributing guide. Let's check the TSC, and because it might be in the charter in the TSC. Now I think about it. We'll document and say these are all the teams and working groups that are CommComm with links. And yeah, there's a lot of ways we could do this. Actually, we might kind of play with it and see where we're like I could see adding it to the README. I could see adding it to the contributing guide or both. But yeah, we should have that list. As far as what the team needs to do, so teams and working groups are different in the Node.js Foundation. working groups have a lot of autonomy, and it's like actual official autonomy. The TSC says, or CommComm or whoever sees the working group that, this is their area of responsibility, and they have complete autonomy and authority to administer that. And so as a result, there's also a lot of like paperwork and stuff involved. They have to have a charter and stuff like that. Teams are not that though. A team is a very, very lightweight small group. It's pretty much just a repo in practice. And so like CommComm or TSC or CCC typically lets teams do what they want, but those teams do not have actual authority. There's a lot of things they're not allowed to do, in fact, one of which is, say, setting up their own code of conduct. So teams actually can't have a code of conduct because it's the code of conduct for the committee that oversees the net plus.
Gotcha.
So
does that...
That's a roundabout way of saying you don't actually need to do any work.
Okay.
For this.
Great.
So one thing I will say though is that like some of our repos that do not necessarily have ownership by a team have code of conducts in them. I have to double check, but I think that like Sitkim has a code of conduct in there, but it points towards the Node.js code of conduct.
Right, that's what I was going to ask, is if there should be a link back to the community committee code of conduct, just to kind of solidify on that and make sure that's stated.
Well, it's kind of a broader organizational question, and actually a really good one. Should teams that don't have the ability to set their own code of conduct, should they be required to link back to the original or not? This is just a broader documentation structure, because you're right, Miles, some teams do point back to the code of conduct, and part of this could be just vestiges of when they were working groups, maybe. I don't know.
I think it's like the boilerplate was always just to copy the code of conduct. But the working groups were free to set their own. I just don't know of any working group that, at least none of the ones I was involved in, that really ever had any interest in doing that.
Yeah, that was the same with website.
It's like, I think most working groups, it's like, whatever, yes, we need one, we'll take the stock one, and then if it's divergent from what we have in the central one now, that's just a historical thing because it was never updated.
An issue open to clean those up as well. We have a list of all the outstanding ones that we're going to update. But as far as teams go, teams do currently, according to the way things are structured, teams do not need to have that link. Of course, free to add it, but yeah, it's not required.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, there's no chartering process or anything like that.
Cool.
Yeah, I mean, I think a team defaults to being under the governance of wherever, like the project, right?
Yep, that's correct. So in this case, the Node.js collection repo falls to CommComm as far as like process and policy and all that. So I think the real question, at least kind of for me, to the Node.js collection repo is, what do you need from us? Like what ways are you blocked on doing the work that you need to do on yourself?
Enabling people to come and contribute. So kind of actually saying it's a thing and having it go be a thing, rather than, a README with no kind of understanding of what's going on there. So that's something I can take on in going and trying to go define that a bit more. Additionally, just getting, basically the ask on it is having people come and do technical editing. And so if there's, if we're not at the place where there are people doing a technical editing, that's the place we need to get to. And so having people, enabling people to come and having those people there is the real goal of that. So kind of that's the place it needs to be at, or is requested to be at. So getting there however we can is the enabling factor there.
Yeah, I mean, I think the quickest thing is, right, the document that Zibby already had that Tierney, you had contributed to around the process for, what technical editors would be following so that they know exactly what they're getting into. The simplest, documents that are required to exist under CommComm, and then us sharing it to all, the world so that we can get those technical editors to you as quick as possible.
Right. Yeah. So I think honestly, I know that was copy and pasted and markdown into the evangelism repo. I may ping Zibby and make sure it's okay if I copy and paste it into the collection team.
Oh yeah, it's totally fine. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So I'll go do that and make sure that's a solid structure and has a good setup on that. But I'll go put that in the README and kind of make sure that's outlined there before going out and kind of pushing on that. So other than that, enabling people and asking people to, if you're interested, come participate. I think that's kind of the key thing there.
Cool.
So, and just to clarify, make sure I didn't miss anything. The action items from this is for the Node.js collection team to go ahead and set up this README, get all the documents in place so that once we start pointing people to that repo, there's going to be materials there to help them onboard and stuff like that. Is that correct? Am I summarizing correctly? Okay, great. All right, anything else before we move on to our last issue? All right, so our last issue is number 64, create official secretary position. Both Jen and Tierney step up to help out with this, which definitely grateful for. This is something Tracy's been doing up until this point, which we're also grateful for. But also, I'd like to really spread this load around. So we've had some conversation, and the reason I went ahead and tagged this agenda is to figure out, if we want to go and have both of you share the role and how that ends up getting split up, how you divide the work, things like this. So Michael, you had some comments in there, and also Jen and Tierney, we hear from you what you think.
Yeah, I just suggested that, it's probably hard for one person to cover all the meetings. So if we have multiple people who are willing, let's find a way to get everybody involved and maybe share the position.
I've only been an observer to CTC and TSC meetings, but how do the other working groups structure the minute taking? Is there an official discussion around that?
Yeah, it tends to just be whoever will volunteer, and if somebody volunteers, everybody's super happy that they're doing it. And there's certain people who tend to volunteer regularly, like Josh does. All the CTC ones when he's there. When he's not there, somebody else will step in. So it's one of those things where, yeah, I think it's an important job to get done and to recognize the people doing it. But there hasn't been, and none of the other groups have necessarily formalized it into a role, or, well, it is a role. It's just been done ad hoc. That's all.
Yeah, because I think so. Something that I've been doing for the minutes, but a piss poor job of is the to-dos afterwards, right? Not just publishing the minutes, but those to-dos have to be activated as issues or added as comments to issues that were already in place. And so that's a lot of work. So I really like Gregor's recommendation, which was a team. And that way a single person doesn't feel, I don't know if that's from Jen and Tierney's perspective, I don't know if that's appealing. I'd love to hear your take on that, but
I'm always open to going and enabling other people to go participate and contribute more. I also think if it is a team, it doesn't necessarily need to be scoped to the community committee proper. It could also be part of the teams as well. So, if the secretary's team or whatever you want to call it could also be, be requested up to go help with another team if they need minutes or something. So that's another idea. But I don't know if we're going kind of too deep and thinking about that at this point.
I'd have to bow out at that point because a lot of the discussion that happens in the other working groups is technical above my pay grade. If that's the direction we want to go with it.
So there was the discussion about trying to use the TSC as a means of coordinating technical committees, like actually having to do some of these write-ups themselves, and making it one of the expectations of a working group is to, like, you know, actually let people know what your working group is working on. There may be some pushback internally on creating extra work, but maybe that's a thing that could also help with this as well.
Sorry, when I was there, I just meant for the community committee and like covering the things that are in the community committee, so the non-technical things. I may have misspoken.
I wouldn't volunteer. I could see people might be happy to volunteer for the local thing, but like volunteering to go around and do all the different groups, I can see that that's a different set of people for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, I think we should start small on this. Just like figure out how to do it for just the community committee, not even our teams and working groups first.
Yeah.
I mean, long term, though, I would like to see this, you know, whatever we figure out that works, you know, adopted elsewhere so we can formalize it. But we can definitely take this in steps. So I feel like the big outstanding question is, do the two of you want to just share this equally, just kind of figure out, you know, between the two of you who's going to, you know, take notes each week, things like that, or however you want to divide the work? Do we want to come up with a more official, like, I don't know, secretary chairperson, something like that?
I'm fine with either. Whatever Jen wants to do is good with me.
Yeah, I mean, the chair could basically, or if there's one person, they could just be the one who's, like somebody suggested, make sure that at least there's somebody available, right?
Well, I like Gregor's suggestion. So after I read his issue, I kind of got it in my head that we could like just do like a rotating schedule. I don't know. What do you think of that, Tierney?
Yeah, sure, that works. Totally works.
Yeah.
And I
and we
think
can just like back channel if somebody needs to fill in.
right. That's what I was gonna say. Is I always find someone else kind of checking and making sure, like filling in where it needs to be, is helpful with minutes. So you know, I'm happy to kind of split that. Totally fine. Sounds good.
All right, sounds good. And thank you
So-
both. Thank you.
Well, I'm so sorry. The result, I got dropped from the call, so I just joined. Oh, what was the resolve from that?
I ejected you from the call, Tracy. I'm just
Didn't want her
kidding.
to hear.
Oh,
So what we decided is,
you can go, Brian. I'm sorry. You explain it.
so Jen and Tierney are gonna share it just equally. We'll just do like a rotating schedule, at least to start, and keep it simple, and we'll see how that works, and we can adjust as need be. But they'll both be equal positions or whatever. You know, we're not gonna have any sort of like structure or formality around it. Which,
Cool.
Yeah, I like that.
Okay.
All right, and that's everything. Let's see. Do we have? Has anyone been watching YouTube? Do we have any Q&A questions there?
No, I can go look.
Yeah, I might try and do it. I get some really weird, like, ringing feedback between my tabs.
I would like to suggest that we have a check-in in a month or two on the secretary position to see whether it needs to be more formalized or how it's been going. Otherwise, just having an open, we're going to leave it open and see what happens, often ends up with lack of engagement down the road. And just having a milestone saying that we'd like to check in would probably be really good. If that sounds okay to you, Tierney and Jen.
Absolutely.
Cool.
Yeah. I don't actually see that being the case, Richard, because this is the only working group that I've had an opportunity to be involved with. So I like, it's my only one. But yeah, I still think that's a good idea, like assessing down the road for sure.
Yeah, I'm not saying that I see it as a thing that's likely. I just, from times I've noticed before where we say, cool, let's just have that happen and it'll work. It often works to just check in, like the IRC channel. which we checked in on earlier. So maybe just if we could have it to do for like July 15th or something, just ask, are you happy?
Cool.
All right. I'm going to recommend we wait 2 months,
Cool.
just so that way each person to like serve as a secretary twice.
Good idea.
Sounds good.
But yeah, that's a very good idea.
So August 15th.
Oh, time flies. So do we have any questions? Sorry.
Gianna, you were
Give me one
checking?
sec. Yeah,
From the YouTube channel?
Yeah.
Yeah, I see. Hello, Mr. Dawson.
Oh.
So doesn't
Oh,
look like
he's
it.
gone.
All right. Well, if there's no questions, of course, if anyone ever has any questions, feel free to file an issue on GitHub. We'd be more than happy to answer them. And with that, we'll close out this meeting.
Cool.
It's going to be on, let's see, June 26th, I think. I'm trying to do this off the top of my head, which is probably not a good idea.
I think it might be the 22nd.
All right,
I think it's Thursday the 22nd. Yeah, looks like.
Cool.
Yep.
Okay, you're correct. Yeah, that's what I get for trying to remember dates off the top of my head.
All right.
So yeah, thanks everyone for attending, and we will see you at the next meeting on the 22nd.
Yeah.
Awesome. Bye.
Bye, everyone.
All right,
Bye.
everyone.